There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the gut and what it does. So again, food and mood are the two things that we can do to help our gut. So I talked about the gut being kind of like a second brain and it running us. We have three nervous systems in our body. And these are really important to note. The first one's called the autonomic nervous system. This runs everything in the background. We don't have to think about our heart beating. It just beats. We don't have to sit there and go, okay, beat faster. I'm running. I'm lifting weights. You don't have to do any of that. The main thing when it comes to the gut, the autonomic nervous system does is that it moves our digestion along. Once we put something in our mouth, it automatically moves it along. It automatically, pulls the nutrients from it, automatically transforms it. And there's a number of processes that happen all the way down to make sure that that happens. And we don't have to think about moving that food another centimeter, down the pipe. It just happens on its own. And then we have a sympathetic nervous system, and that's our fight or flight response. And the other nervous system that we have is called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that is rest and digest. So which one do you think we use for food? It's parasympathetic, rest and digest. Which one do you think we're in most of the time? And that's fight or flight. Now, we're not designed that way. We're designed to be these very peaceful, communal living creatures, the way we are when we're at the gym at TriFit, basically. And essentially, fight or flight has very specific bodily functions. Really, what happens when you're in fight or flight is that you are trying to run from some sort of large predator. Let's call it a lion. Sitting around at camp, hanging out, relaxing with everybody, and in comes the lion, and then all of a sudden you're in full tilt running. And what the body does is it shunts glucose. It moves all your fuels so that you can run away from that lion. Now, the fact is that most of us are doing what I'm doing right now, and you're sitting at a desk. So if I'm getting a little nerves from giving this talk, it's in a sympathetic nervous system, and my body thinks, though, it's running from a lion. That primitive brain response hasn't changed as men and women evolved over the years. So essentially, that's the same. So we want to be in that parasympathetic nervous system, and we need to be mindful on a day-to-day basis of those times where we're in that sympathetic or fight or flight mode, because, and particularly when we're eating and particularly when we're digesting, when we're in that sympathetic nervous system, what happens? The body is running from something. It's not digesting. It's just basically shutting down every function that it doesn't really need to get away from a predator. So when you think about it that way, it starts to become you start to see it over and over again in our lives, and and how this can show up for us. So that's a really important background information to know. Second important, so those are the three nervous systems: autonomic, parasympathetic, and sympathetic. And we want to be in the parasympathetic rest and digest state when we eat, when we relax, when we're digesting food. Second is the gut's home to our immune system. So again, with that second brain piece of it, all those microbes and other things, there's T cells and B cells, and it is all resident in our gut. Everything in our gut is reacting to what we're putting into it. It's reacting to what's in the blood, into the bloodstream, but it's essentially we have an entire microbiome that is helping us to digest food, and it's doing it a very at the atomic and molecular level. So from the moment a piece of food goes in your mouth, it's getting broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, and then each of those pieces, depending on what it is, starts turning into fuel. Now, we talk at the gym about macros. About the three macros, which are protein, fat, and carbs. So those are three pieces that it gets pulled into. You've heard of things like in diets, like a low sodium diet, or, so there are different molecules: sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium, all the calcium, all these elements that have to be pulled from the food in order to fuel our nutrition. So and when that goes awry, our immune system can go awry as well. Or when that goes awry, it can cause inflammation, it can cause malnourishment, and it can cause these kind of subtle stressors behind the scenes. So two things to know, nervous system and the immune system. And then it's also important to know, what does our gut do? It does three things. It digests food, it eliminates it, and it helps to protect us. So that immune function, again, is protecting us from what is coming in from the outside. Because again, it's a closed tube, and everything that goes into that tube gets broken down into smaller and smaller molecules. And sometimes those can be bacteria. Sometimes the integrity of the tube can get compromised. So these are all things that the body is very vigilant about. So what's the best way to describe this? The car wash. We like going to the car wash up the street, and I think it's a great metaphor that hopefully I don't ruin for the rest of you every time you go to the car wash. But essentially, it's the same thing. You go into this tube and then you come out the other side transformed. It's kind of the opposite of the car wash, I guess. Your car's clean when you leave and not so much when you eat and eliminate. So the first thing in the car wash that happens is you get there and you sit outside and you have to find a way to get on the track. And basically, when it comes to the human body, we're responding to signals of hunger. We all need fuel. And when we don't have enough fuel, it's an emergency to the brain. The brain freaks out and it goes for the lowest common denominator. And if you saw our talk about several weeks ago on sugar season, sugar is the lowest common denominator because we need glucose to fuel our brain. And so when the brain doesn't get glucose, or it thinks it doesn't have enough to run away from that predator in a fight or flight state, then it's going to drive you to the nearest store, to the nearest chip aisle or cookie aisle, and you will have your glucose in hand. And it always ends up the same way. My patients tell me the same thing. I tell myself the same thing. It's like, how did that just happen? Did I really just eat a whole, this package of Oreos? Did I really just eat this? Or did I just really go through an entire thing of chips? What happened there? Because I think all of us being, fit and fairly knowledgeable people about our health, we wouldn't choose that for ourselves, but that just dictates the amount of emergency that this is to the brain, that it will go and get you that glucose. You may not be running from anything. You may be just sitting on the couch, but it will go and it'll grab that for you. So what is happening to make us hungry? There are neurotransmitter signals. The main ones you need to know, there are three that you need to know about. One is called ghrelin. One is called leptin, not lectin, leptin, LEP. And the other one is called cortisol, which you'll all know is our stress hormone. So ghrelin, the way I remember this is, if your stomach is growling, it's ghrelin. So ghrelin turns on the hunger signals and says, go get food. And it'll do this. It's not necessarily always an emergency to your brain. If you eat your meals at regular intervals, your 3 meals a day, if you're eating dinner, say at 6 o'clock every day, sometime around 5:30, as your body anticipates this meal, ghrelin will turn on and say, hey, I think we're hungry now, or I'm getting excited for this meal, and go ahead and eat, because this is the proper time to fuel us. Other times it's the stress eating, and we'll get into that in a minute with the cortisol. So there's that. Now leptin has to do with fat, and it turns it off, because the body knows that if we have too much glucose, it needs to store it as fat, and fat is very nutrient dense. It's calorically dense, and it's very nutrient dense, and it takes a lot of effort for the body to make it, even though when we look down at our guts, maybe it doesn't seem like that. But leptin essentially, when ghrelin comes on, then we eat, and then when we get satiated, when we've eaten enough, leptin turns on, and leptin says, okay, brain, stop eating. We don't need this anymore. And then you stop, and then you've got the proper amount of fuel. So what ends up happening though is your brain can, as we've talked about, it can go a little haywire. So a couple things can happen. We mentioned an autonomic nervous system that everything can happen automatically. But we can also override these urges. And so if we're hungry and we're enjoying this meal, we can just keep going and going and going. And that's where we become what's called leptin resistant. We basically become resistant to the signal to turn off that satiety. And the biggest culprit of this is our stress hormone, cortisol. Cortisol helps wake us up in the morning. It has a lot of great functions. And when we have enough, it helps us to respond to stress. And when we're stressed, the body is, again, trying to get as much fuel into it as possible. And basically, cortisol will override ghrelin. Or cortisol will, basically ride herd on ghrelin, and it will turn off leptin, and that stress eating will turn into sugar, and that sugar will that's not used will get turned into fat. So this is where, at the beginning, when I talked about stress, when mood and food being the two most important things in gut health, that's where stress causes us the greatest derangement. It turns off that signal that says you're full, and it really sends the one that says you're hungry into haywire to get what you need. All right, so that's sitting outside the car wash. One way to stimulate hunger is to be very mindful about what you eat. So while we're sitting outside the car wash, while your food is sitting on not on a pen, but on a fork, waiting to get in your mouth, take a moment to get in that parasympathetic state. Take a deep breath, inhale your food, smell it. That smelling your food enables the juices in your gut to get going, and it helps you to digest it more. It also helps the saliva, and we'll get to that in a minute. The second thing you do at the car wash is you put your car in neutral. So neutral is where you want to get in that parasympathetic state. That's where you want to smell your food and start to relax. But we also have to recognize the most important person at the car wash when we're in our neutral state in the first stage. The most important person at the car wash is not the person who dries the towels. It is not the person who takes your money. It is the hose man. He's the guy who stands at the front of the car wash with the hose, and he sprays it down. And we've all been there, whether we're washing our own car or not. You cannot soak the car up without water. And it's the same in your gut. What happens in your mouth is that we have saliva. I think we all know this, but what most people forget is that all the enzymes that are in your stomach are also in your mouth in order to pre-digest your food. And so when we skip that process, let's say you follow me to Chipotle and I get a bowl that's about this high, and I'm really hungry because my ghrelin is turned up and my leptin is turned off, and I have 10 minutes to get my lunch done. That food is just getting shoveled in. We wolf it down, as they say. And what's not happening is getting pre-digested. So that giant bowl is going to turn into a giant bit of indigestion. And we've all seen the commercials. If you remember the old one, I think it was Alka-Seltzer. It was like, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. And the guy's leaning back in terrible pain. We don't want that. We want to relax. We want to eat small bites. And the main thing is we have to get that amylase and lipase. Amylase breaks down glucose. That's our main fuel. And lipase breaks down fat. That's our other fuel. And we need to get that saliva going and break everything down. And one thing you can do for this is chew your food. And I know we all chew our food. We don't always wolf it down, but do an experiment. Chew your food 30 times. And then feel how it feels in your mouth. It's going to be like this kind of slimy ball. It's called a bolus. It'll be slimy. That's the state at which your body wants to swallow the food. So it's just a signal. You don't have to do this every time. Back in the 1920s, there was a movement called Fletcherizing, where everybody chewed their food 100 times. It was crazy. Don't do that. Just do it once. Recognize that your body likes slow and gradual, and it wants to pre-digest that food. And the more you pre-digest, the better it is going to be. So the other thing is to have smaller bites. So don't go through the entire Chipotle bowl all in one sitting, small bites. And eventually, when you're doing this and slowing down, you get the proper signals of that ghrelin to turn on for the hunger, but you also get that leptin signal to turn it off. And it's a lot easier to recognize when you're not in a hurry. All right. Next is we go down the esophagus into the stomach. And this happens in slow, gradual waves. So this is at the point of the car wash where that little hook kind of catches on your wheel and starts to move you very slowly through the process. You have to eat slowly. Don't eat everything at once. The main thing is that when you get to the stomach, we all know that there's something down there called stomach acid to break everything up. Now, if you eat a giant steak, you're not eating that entire giant steak. You're not just chewing it and making it that same size. As things go through your system, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the main thing that makes it smaller, you have hydrochloric acid pumps. They're called proton pumps in your gut, and they help to break down your food into all their essential nutrients and fuel you. But if you're not letting that turn on by eating too fast, by not pre-digesting your food up in your mouth, what ends up happening is you get heartburn and you get irritation called gastritis. So when that happens, that's when we reach for all the over-the-counter stuff, Alka-Seltzer, Tums, Rolaids, Prilosec, all these things. And all these things are meant to just manage the stomach acid. So basically, you want to eat slowly. As we get older, we lose a little bit of stomach acid. There's also this delicate dance that starts to happen, as it does in the car wash. You start to get all these soap and wax squirted from a million different directions. That is delicate dance is also happening in your stomach. You're getting things called digestive enzymes that are breaking everything down and making it nice and easy to go through your system. So those are the things at the beginning of eating where you can slow down, relax, eat small bites, let it digest. And these are things, believe it or not, that I see every single day that get ignored that really contribute to great gut health. When we go too fast, things get inflamed. And when they get inflamed, there's a tendency with those habits to stay inflamed. And then we are not digesting, or we're not getting enough nutrients in digesting our food. We get heartburn, we get gastritis. As we continue to go down, we have the gallbladder and the liver. Gallbladder helps us emulsify fats. It squirts out something called bile. The liver, we can get to it another time, but the liver is basically like the Amazon processing center. Everything goes in, and then it sends everything out in packages. So those are things we have to be mindful of. Fructose, as we talked about in the sugar talk, goes directly to the liver and insults the liver. The liver is also filtering out toxins. So we don't want to give it too many toxins and too many things to do, because then it slows us down. So it becomes very important to select foods that are not toxic. Finally, we get to like the small and large intestine. The small intestine has these things called villi. They're these fronds, and this soaks up all of your nutrients and puts it into your body. And we have to take really good care of our small intestine. It gets forgotten about quite a bit. I mentioned celiac at the top. Those villi get blunted. They look like haystacks when you're allergic to wheat. There's something in your gut on the lining called tight junctions. Those can open up and things can leak through. So if you've heard that term leaky gut, that's a real common cause of inflammation. And for those of you who suffer from seasonal allergies or have really debilitating allergies, oftentimes it starts with that leaky gut. The immune system's always so busy chasing down little particles of food that it that leaks through to the system, because it's only one cell width wide, infinitesimally small. When things leak through to the gut, into the bloodstream, the immune system is on high alert. And believe it or not, when that piece of pollen comes in the springtime or in the fall, when the seasons change, an overactive immune system makes those allergies much, much worse. So when you eat healthy, when you eat in a way that is very healing to your gut, those things your immune system is robust, and those things tend to fall away pretty quickly. So the other thing we get when people have restrictive diets, where well, I don't eat dairy, I don't eat wheat, I don't eat soy, I don't eat this, I don't eat that. It gets more and more and more restrictive. over and over and over again, what ends up happening is that there's only so many bugs in your microbiome that help you digest your food. And if you're not feeding them, if let's say you don't feed them in a year and then you feed them, or if you've ever been on a fast for multiple days and then you go and eat a giant hamburger, it's going to hurt and you're not going to be able to digest anything. So basically we starve out those colonies of microbes that are trying to digest our food, and it can't digest it. And what ends up happening is you get a lot of gas and bloating. All these microbes in the small and the large intestine, they kind of poop and fart and burp the same that we do. And we end up getting gas and bloating, and it becomes really hard to resolve without repleting that and kind of working our way back. So restrictive diets can cause a lot of bloating, and it can cause what's called dysbiosis in that microbiome. That means that opportunistic bacteria, there's dozens and dozens of colonies of different types of bacteria, they disappear and others predominate, and you get this gas and bloating. And we get those are common causes of what's called IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which I see in the office a lot. And this causes diarrhea, constipation. Now, when we're talking about the large intestine, a common question that I get is, how often should I be pooping? A lot of people don't poop a lot. They're constipated, believe it or not. Part of that is due to stress, and part of it is due to other factors. Sometimes we don't know what those are, and we have to get under the hood and figure it out. But you should be pooping 1 to 3 times per day. Definitely at least once a day. I have patients who come in and I ask them, well, how often are you pooping? And they say, well, I go on a regular basis. Great. What is that? And they'll say, well, I go once a week. And, when that happens, you have a lot of waste that's just sitting around. And just like the garbage in the bags in our homes, if that garbage is sitting around for too long, it starts to putrefy, and you have this long tube where all of this fluid and other things are being exchanged, and all that putrefaction starts to end up in your system and become toxic. And this, believe it or not, can spin off things. Overgrowths, things like joint pain can often be from just kind of this rotting and ripening of waste in the low gut. So definitely want to be pooping at least once per day. You don't want to be pooping too much, because then you're getting dehydrated. So if you're having stool that's too loose on too regular a basis, that's an opportunity to intervene as well. So that's the other thing is, people ask me, because as a gastro doc, people ask me questions about their poo all the time. So sorry for the poo emoji talk here, but the other thing is, what should my poop look like? It should look somewhat like a banana, or a banana that's been broken up into 3 pieces. And that's pretty much normal. I wouldn't obsess about it, but those are things that, it's just a mindfulness and a method to, just to be aware of what's going on, to make sure that everything is traveling through in a healthy way. So those are some, quick refresher about how the gut works, quick refresher about how it gets inflamed, and those are a few quick tips in order to help to make sure that the gut stays healthy. Again, just to kind of wrap it up, you really need to be mindful of 2 things in your life to have a healthy gut. Number 1 is food. You want to eat healthy food. You want to be around, you want to be in a parasympathetic state, a restful state when you do that. And you want that food to be as healthy as possible. So the less processed, the less toxic, the more organic, the better. And then you need to make sure that you're eating not too much and not too little, so that the nourishment happens, so the neurotransmitters all talk to each other, and that they talk to you, and you can start and stop when you're supposed to. And then finally, the mood. we don't want to be stressed out when we eat. And don't have your phone with you. Don't be watching the news while you're eating. Be around, we're designed to be around very happy, laughing people. In South America, they call it sobremesa. And what that means is a big table where everybody is around eating dinner and meals, laughing and enjoying themselves and having a great time. And those sobremesa meals last for hours on end. And I believe that's the way we're supposed to be. And all of that laughing, all of that parasympathetic activity really helps their rest and digest function. Just so eat good food, stay in a good mood, and you will have great gut health. And I will now take any of your questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or if you're shy, feel free to just type them into the chat.
Hi, Dr. Dan. Thank you for doing this tonight.
Thanks, Shannon. Good to see you.
I just have a question about probiotics. Do you recommend probiotics for gut health?
I do. Thank you. That's a great question. Probiotics are those microbe species that we're talking about that colonize our small intestine and our large intestine. And they tend to help restore order. Most people think that they're like these little spores that, end up being seeds and, growing these colonies in our gut. But really what they end up doing is they kind of hang out for just a little bit and they kind of muscle all of the bad bugs and other flora out of the way. So common probiotics, if you're shopping for them at the store, the ones that you want to have are bifidobacteria. Those are the ones that colonize our small intestine. And then the ones that are in the ingredients for the large intestine are called lactobacteria. And the ones you may have heard of that's really common in yogurts and milks and things is acidophilus. So those are a few things to look for, but those bacteria, they're good bacteria and they really help to regulate things in the low gut. Now, one thing I should mention too is you can get those from food. So if your gut's strong enough and you can have fermented foods, these are things like sauerkraut and pickles and things like Greek yogurts that don't have a lot of sugar in them. These all have just very naturally have good bacteria and they have these probiotic functions in there. So that really tends to, help to regulate the gut. So that's a great question, Shannon. Thanks for bringing it up.
I got one, Dr. Dan.
Sure.
Can you touch on more of like the mental, emotional pieces of the gut? Like, well, really that piece, and also the link that I've heard to, certain hormonal issues, like all of these hormonal diseases that are coming up, like Hashimoto's and Alzheimer's. And can you touch on that at all? So
yeah, I can just touch on that in a broad way. So what you're talking about broadly with Hashimoto's and things like rheumatoid arthritis and other things, it's autoimmunity. And basically that just means the body attacks itself. When we get and the immune system becomes overactive. So in the case of rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, the body's attacking the joint space, say in the fingers or the wrists or the knees. When it comes to Hashimoto's, the body is attacking the thyroid, which is the little butterfly-shaped gland here that regulates our metabolism, and it could really throw things out of whack. In the case of the thyroid, the production centers for the hormones get attacked, and then the levels of hormones get really crazy. And one thing that I recommend to all my patients with autoimmunity is to be on a gluten-free diet. In the case of the thyroid, there's studies that say that there's kind of a mimicry where the body mistakes gluten for thyroid and vice versa. So it can sometimes, trigger these attacks. The other thing that causes autoimmunity, we mentioned it earlier, is a leaky gut. So if you have like this leaky gut situation for an extended period of time, which is basically like a very inflamed gut that is letting things through before they're fully digested into the bloodstream, you have this immune system that's on alert, and the body always just wants to put things places. It'll attack something and blow it into pieces, and then you have all these little pieces that it's got to gather up and get rid of. And since they're outside the gut, it's just going to put it somewhere else. In the case of arthritis, it'll put it in the joint space. And then when we're laying down at night and then for extended periods, all of it settles and, becomes inflamed in the morning. So to keep that gut, keep the inflammation in the gut at bay, to keep those joint spaces, to keep the gut from leaking and being inflamed, really tends to put a lot of these conditions in a sort of remission. Just quick story. I had a young woman who came in, she's a waitress, and she had to start calling in sick to work because she couldn't carry the trays. Her hands hurt too much from arthritis. And we just sourced, we took the inflammatory foods out of her diet. We had her keep a diary. That's something I also recommend. So for the folks who have the MyFitnessPal app and are working with Laurel and the folks at the gym on diet, track your food, because sometimes there's things that you eat that are inflaming and you don't even know it. It can range from, dairy, soy, gluten, that sort of thing. And if you track it on a regular basis and track your symptoms, let's say it's joint pain or being fatigued, falling asleep, then you can figure out exactly what that inflammation is and put yourself on a process to heal. You take it out for a little while and then let things heal up, and then you can trial it and put it back in. So Laurel, did that answer your question? I tried. I don't know if I broke it into too small of pieces, but I also don't want to get rambling here either. So
no, that was great. Thank you.
I have a question in the chat from John. It's just a comment. Thank you, John. And then Stephen asks, I've heard artificial sweeteners can affect our gut bugs in a bad way, like sugar, alcohols and stuff. Is this true? Stephen, yes, this is true. Our gut bugs are not fooled. And if they see something that looks like sugar, they'll treat it like sugar. But it's kind of like, putting the, it's like kind of putting a like low level gas in a sports car, right? The car will run, but it's not going to run as efficiently as it would, and the exhaust is not going to be the same as it would, and it's going to start destroying the things inside the car if it's left to its devices over a long period of time. So our gut bugs are not fooled. Our brain might be fooled that, hey, here's something sweet, but a lot of times the sugar, alcohols can hook up with fats and cause a lot of indigestion. Those fats are called FODMAPs, they're fructooligosaccharides. And this can cause the gut to kind of be bubbly. It can cause IBS-D and diarrhea, that sort of thing. And it can really create these conditions where it's working on the nerves and spasming the gut, or slowing those nerves down in the gut and causing a lot of indigestion, diarrhea, constipation, all the things that we don't want. So, the body's not fooled. If you're going to sweeten something, keep it as natural as possible. It shouldn't be manufactured. And try to keep the sweets, the sweetener to a minimum. But, with cooking, things like applesauce tend to go a longer way than something like sucralose, NutraSweet, Equal, those sorts of things. Those are they just end up becoming toxic and harmful and causing the gut bugs to get dysbiotic in the way that we talked. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Kara.
Hi, Kara.
I was trying to type and I don't know what's wrong with my keyboard, so I will talk. So I've been recently going through some testing due to some digestive health issues, and we're kind of still in the phase of figuring things out. But one thing that the GI doctor was talking about was PI IBS, like post-infectious purchase. Like I had a really bad bout of food poisoning last year, and ever since then I felt like I've just not I've I don't know my body anymore.
Yeah,
Like what
yeah.
food it likes. So I've done like the low FODMAP and like reintroducing stuff. I didn't know if you had any more information about that.
Yeah, great question, Kara. It's a little tricky because that's the traditional way we all know about to have kind of an upset gut, right? We go to a foreign country or we have a bad buffet, we're, without a sneeze guard or something. And, there's some sort of pathogen or bug that's on that we ingest in the food. And the body does its best to try to get rid of it. And the best way that it knows how to do that is to, pull water into the colon and just blow everything out. Sorry to make that graphic, but, that tends to be the way it goes. And then what happens is that sometimes those bugs can stick around. They're really hard for the body and the immune system to get rid of. A little bit's okay, but a lot of them are, tend to wreak havoc. So, your GI is going in the right direction by just making sure the diet is very clean. And then if they haven't already, there are stool tests that can be done. They've made a lot of strides in the last several years of being able to kind of map the microbiome and figure out, okay, these are the bugs that are in most people, the species of them, and how how many are in this colony, and is that normal course of business, or are there things like parasites or even like staph and strep, which we have on our skin all over our body and can get can make us ill. Are those things kind of predominating in the gut? And so they should be able to run a test like that and identify some of the areas that need a little boost, and they can also identify the areas that are the colonies that are causing issues. And then a lot of times there's medications, or in my case, a naturopathic doctor, herbals work very well, things like oil of oregano, and there's a number of herbs in those sorts of families that are very antimicrobial that work nicely over a period of time in the gut to kind of get things settled down. But the main thing is just continuing to keep things as healthy as possible. From eating, testing different things, being mindful of, okay, I ate this and that happened, or this keeps happening at this particular time of day. That's where the diarying of the food tends to help a good deal. And then, trying to figure out, what is there specifically a pathogen, but the gut does recover, and it just takes some time, and some probiotics and the other things we talked about may be helpful, but but yeah, I treat every case very individually, so I can only speak to that broadly. Hopefully it was a good answer, Kara.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Dan, can you give everyone just a little information on your business, like where you are? Maybe put it in the chat. I know you do. I think you do free consultations with folks if they want to dive into their blood work, or if they're having specific issues, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd be delighted. I approach gastroenterology and hormones from a naturopathic point of view. And I work at Chambers Clinic in Scottsdale. It's in the Grayhawk area, Scottsdale Road and 101. We also have an office in Tempe at McClintock and Broadway Road. But yeah, I offer free 15-minute visits. We can do them on Zoom or the phone if you like, but I always enjoy when people come in. Just to talk about a specific situation and see if it's an area where I can help. My goal is always to give someone direction, whether or not you come to see me in person for more extensive analysis and treatment. But I always love to get the 15-minute visits to give folks direction and where they are. Online, you can find me at Dr. Dan Wool, DRDANWOOL, just about everywhere. drdanwool.com. I've got some videos and things up there that hopefully it will be entertaining and helpful.
Or they can just hunt you down and find out what time you train and work out.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Take your
there at least
break
once or
for
twice a
45
week at
minutes.
least. And yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to answer anybody's questions, and so we can all get better. And I'm going to put my info in the chat.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm so glad that we were able to pivot and do it online.
Yeah, and guys, members, if you have other topics or things that you are interested in, you have questions about, please let us know, and we'll get Dr. Dan in for another one of these, hopefully in person. All right, see you guys.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.